everybody, JP here once again, and yeah, based on that little comparison with stems of Hetfield's actual guitar tracks, I would say we got a lot closer this time around. And for those of you who didn't catch it, about 2 months ago I did a little video on the Black Album guitar tones, and although I feel like I got my point across in terms of the bus compression and the additional EQ and things that we went over in that, I did want to take another crack at it because I realized that my playing was not very tight. It was very sloppy, actually. And I learned some new things about what James actually used on that album, including a Mesa Mark IV head, which as many times as I'd watched Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica, I'd never actually noticed before in the background. So the Mark IV head is there. Although James only really mentioned the 2C Plus in interviews, I did find a Guitar Player magazine from September '91 where he mentions that the ADA MP1 played a big part in his tone as well. So yeah, we're going to get into all that here. Like I said, I wanted to take another crack at it, and I kind of just filed that away in the back of my mind and figured, you know, someday when I'm bored, I'll sit down, try some plugins, whatever. But then a couple weekends ago, Nembrini Audio had a sale on their Kali Axis plugin, which is their version of the Mesa Tri-Axis preamp with a little power amp and, you know, some speaker simulator, cabinet simulator, and an IR loader and whatnot. Anyway, it was on sale for 20 bucks. I thought, hey, you know, maybe I could do a thing on the Load guitar tones because James started using the Tri-Axis around 95 or so for the Load album. Tried it out, noticed that it had a Mark IV mode in addition to the Mark IIc Plus mode, and started stacking them, and found out really quickly that this thing does a killer Black Album. So we're going to get into all that. And just to clarify, I played 3 tracks just like James described doing throughout the Black Album. Left, center, and right, identical rhythm parts. The left and right go through the main Mark IIc Plus sounds, as well as the Mark IV and ADA MP1, as I believe James played through all those amps simultaneously and blended them together for his tone. And then the center is the Bob Rock Jose Arredondo modded Marshall head, the thickener track. That's kind of blended in there to kind of fill in some space in the center. I played them all with my Gibson Flying V with an EMG 81 in the bridge. I did not have access to a Dan Electro 6-string bass. I would have loved to have done those octave down parts that James overdubbed, but until I get my hands on one of them, I won't be able to do that. I think those sounds are blended with James guitars and the stems that I used for comparison in the intro. So we just tried to get the sound without them as best as we could, and I think we did an all right job of that. As close as you can get without building a tent of doom anyway. Maybe I'll do that for the next video. I want to start off by focusing on the Mark IIc Plus, which is really the main bit of the sound. This would be James' main tone from like Master of Puppets through the Black Album touring cycle, where he used his Mark IIc Plus head with an additional parametric EQ in the effects loop. It was an Aphex B&B EQ. It was originally Flemming Rasmussen's idea, and then, you know, James went from using it in the studio to then integrating it into his live rig. I was in the last video using my modified DC5 head, Mesa DC5, which I've modded to not 100% Mark IIc Plus specs, but about as close as you can get that head. And I used the Master Effects PM EQ pedal to simulate EQ that James used, which is what that pedal is all about. It's a fantastic pedal. This time around, I'm doing something a little different. I'm using this Kiive Audio K-Strip, which has an API mode that sounds fantastic. The whole plugin sounds fantastic, but the API mode was perfect for here, and it's fully parametric, so you can do things with it that you can't do with some of the modeled API 550 EQ plugins that are out there. Yeah, this was huge. So let's just listen to the 2C Plus. For now, I'm going to bypass the additional EQ. In fact, it's a little easier to do this with just one side. So, pretty typical Hetfield settings. A lot of treble, a lot of gain, no mids, a little bit of bass. This dynamic voice on 10, which simulates the V shape of the graphic EQ. A lot of people don't like this on the actual Tri-Axis. I love it here. I think it sounds great. And again, I'm using this orange 4x12 V30, 421 and 57 together, IR. It's about as close as I could get the cabinet sim to sound like it. And I love the cabinet sim here, I just think the IR sounded better with the 2C+. But I did use the cabinet sim in I think almost all the other instances. And now we can add real quick, I want to compare this. That's our tone from last time. It's the DC5 with actually the SSL E channel for the additional EQ. We bypass those. So yeah, my playing being tighter helped a lot. So I'm happy about that now. But yeah, I don't think we were that far off with the DC5, but that's about as close as that amp can get. So then, once I was happy with the 2C Plus sounds, I started playing with the Mark IV. That's the Mark IV by itself, left and right together. Very similar settings, only there's no additional EQ on the Mark IV. I kind of figured if James was using the additional EQ on his 2C Plus, he probably wouldn't use it on an additional amp that he's blending with the 2C Plus, because the whole idea is you want to blend something that sounds a little different, right? So you want to bring out another element to the sound. So I did not use the additional EQ on the Mark IV channels. But that's where the bottom comes from. Oh, and before I close that, I did end up using the cab sim on these. Let me just show you what that sounds like. That's the Mark IV through the same IR as the 2C Plus. And I just thought the IR didn't sound as good with this amp. I thought this Mesa Boogie Rectifier V30 cabinet, 57 and 421, played around with the settings, and thought that really did a better job. What are we at, about 9.5? So we were close. There was still something missing. And then I remembered reading that interview where James talked about the ADA. And lo and behold, Nembrini does an MP1. And it is actually pretty new from them. It's so this actually has a Metallica preset. I've tweaked it a little bit, but it actually is pretty close by itself. Overdrive 1 on 4, 2 on 6, master gain at 5, bass at 0. 0 is like noon on these, by the way. Mid at -12, treble 4, presence 4, voicing tube, and the only effect I'm using is just a noise gate. So, again, didn't think it sounded great with the IR. Love the way it sounded with the cab sim. I think we were down at about -10 with these. So just listen to what that adds to the 2C Plus tone. That's without. That's with. It's like that extra cardboard, grainy mid-range, even with the mids cut, you know, upper mids. And that's them all together. Not bad. So now we've got the center to go. The thickener. And for this, I could have used any variety of modded Marshall amp sims. But since I was on a Nembrini kick, I thought I'd try out their Marshall JMP1 preamp. The JMP1 was super popular later on in the 90s. It didn't exist at the time of the Black Album. They used Bob Rock's Jose Arredondo modded Marshall. I think it was a 73 head modded, and James made the logo look like asshole instead of Marshall, so it's pretty infamous. But I thought this sounded really good. I'm on OD1 mode. OD2 is a little more modern sounding. A little more DSL, TSL going on there. But OD1 with the gain cranked. Bass 1, middle -4, treble 3, presence 3. And again, I'm using the cab sim on this. The IR doesn't sound bad for this, it sounds a little too much like the Mesas, and the whole point of this track is to be a little different. So yeah, props to Nembrini. Again, I don't own the MP1 or the JMP1 yet, but I think next time they go on sale, I'll be adding them to the collection for sure. Just to show you how that works with everything else. So it's the 2C plus without. That's with it. Everything's together. Without. With. So, as you can tell, the thickener is doing its job. And now, let's talk about our aux sends. Of course, we've got the SC Sound City guitar room. You all know how much I love that. I'm only using the middle mics, the 67s. But I'm EQing it quite a bit. That's without the EQ. A little dark and boomy. I'm gonna turn up the bass a tiny bit, actually. And I'm using that Dolby A crush mode for a nice little touch there. So this is our ambiance for the guitars. And then we've got something new. So I went down the UAD rabbit hole, finally. I picked up a satellite processor, and now I have access to all these wonderful plugins that I didn't have before. And you can't really talk Bob Rock and guitar without an AMS-DMX delay, because it was such a huge part of his sound. You could actually see him tweaking it in the 1.5-year video. I think he said in an interview he owns 3 of them himself, and at least one of them with this chorus strip, which was additional and pretty rare, actually. If you could find one with one now, that still works. There's a couple scenes of the control room where I swear there's like 4 or 5 of these things, all doing different things. So here I'm just using the X delay, which is the left guitars go into the right of the delay, and the right guitars go into the left of the delay. So you get a little cross panning happening. And I'm on pretty short delay times. I'm on 80 on one side and just about 90 on the other. And that's it, a bit of regen, because there's a really nice tone to the regeneration on here. So I'm not really going for like multiple repeats. It's very short, but I do want the sound of that regen, because that's one of the signatures. So this is 100% wet. See, if I pull back the regen, see, it's the sound of that really quick. And this can do so much more. I think I'm gonna do a video specifically on some of the other things Bob did with this, like mainly chorus, super cool chorus stuff on guitars with these. Chorus stuff that doesn't really sound like chorus, if you know what I mean. But for here, we're just using it as the X delay, and it plays really well with the Sound City room. So together, that's our ambience on the guitars. And if you listen to these original guitars, you will notice it. So one other thing we need to talk about, and we went over this in the last video as well, was the bus compression and how James did not like the sound of compression on his guitars. He felt that they made them sound smaller. And the compromise to that was, since they were mixing on an SSL 6000E, which had 3 sub-stereo buses that all fed into a master bus, Bob was able to compress the drums and the bass and get the sound of that really, you know, characteristic SSL bus compressor sound for the rhythm section, while leaving the guitars alone. The guitars were on their own separate bus, James's rhythm guitars, that is, and he was able to process them separately. So James was happy with that result, and I've gone and set it up here just like that last video so we could hear the difference. So far throughout this video, you've only been hearing the bus compression on the drums and bass and nothing on the guitars. So I'm gonna go back and forth now. Let me open these up first. So that's our stereo compressor. I'm sorry, that's on the right is the drum and bass compression, and on the left is the overall mix compression. And we're gonna go back and forth between them and see what we think. Now we're on the mix. So I feel it's even more noticeable now since the guitars are bigger sounding than they were in the last video. You can, I use the analogy of shoulders, and when the compression is only on the drums and bass, the shoulders of the guitar stand very broad and wide, whereas when the compression is on the overall mix, it kind of slopes those shoulders a little bit on the guitars. That's really the best visual analogy I could make. So yeah, I think we covered just about everything. Man, I'm very happy to have accomplished something a bit better than I think I had last time, and I hope you all feel the same. Please let me know, like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. I'm gonna be doing more Black Album specific videos because, you know, again, it's the reason I'm in this business to begin with, and there's a lot of cool stuff to break into from that. I'm gonna do a video on the clean tones from that album, and I think I'm gonna do a video on Bob's use of the AMS-DMX delay and kind of some different ways you can use that on guitars in addition to what we did here with the old X delay. And I think we might get into some of the vintage instruments that were used on the Black Album, because that was sort of the first time Metallica did anything like that. You know, that was something that Bob Rock really introduced them to. And, you know, they've since turned into some massive collectors of vintage pieces. And I'm sure some of that money made from the Black Album helped with that habit big time. But anyhow, until then, I gotta say, I'm gonna try to keep up with my weekly videos, but June is gonna be a crazy month for me. I'm actually doing some audio mixing for the Stanley Cup Finals. So that's gonna take a lot of my time, especially over the next 2 weeks. It kind of depends how long the series goes. I'm still gonna do my best to put together a video every week for you guys, because I love doing them. And I really do appreciate all the great feedback I get from y'all. All right, so until next time, take care guys, love you, bye.